Shabbos Parshas Matas Masei Mevorch Mechodesh Menachemov Tavshin Mem Zayin. So one of the things it says in our parsha is about the Milchama that Hashem commanded Moshe Rabbeinu to do against Midian. And the interesting thing about that war that Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded to do against Midian is that he was told that once you do this war, afterwards, you will be gathered to your nation. In other words, you will pass away. So this was the last mission, the ultimate mission of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, to fight the war of Midian, which indicates that this was like a culmination and even to a certain degree an encapsulation of what Moshe Rabbeinu was. And to such a degree that the Chazal emphasized, if he knew that he was going to pass away after he fought the war of Midian, he could have delayed it. But still in all, Hashem told him to fight the war. He right away took it upon himself and he fought this war. So it says in our parsha, "החלצו מאתכם, draft from amongst you, anoshim letzava, men for the army, v'yiyu al Midian losses nikmas Hashem b'Midian, and they will go upon Midian to place the vengeance of Hashem against Midian, that Midian went through all this trouble. First of all, they hired Bilam to go ahead and curse the Yidden, and when that didn't work out, so they gave them their daughters to make the Yidden sin, and so on. So Hashem was taking revenge, and he said, we have to draft people for the army to fight against Midian. Elef lamata, 1,000 for each tribe. We'll see later on a different Pirush that says how many went to war. It's known the Maimer about this on the Torah of our parsha, Hachsidische parsha, like the Rebbe always says, the Torah of the week and the Torah of the week is something that Chassidim said has to be the Chassidische Maveseder, that a person needs to review the Seder from the Chassidische Seder is reading at least the Torah and Torah the Parsha. We find this also in Mamorim following this as well, that they speak about this pasuk. Until the well-known Maimer in the Kuntra Sechalzu, it came out as its own separate booklet, even though there was many Mamorim in the year where the Rebbe Rashab said this in Tafresh Nun Tes in 1899, or actually came out earlier. It must have been the end of 1898. The Rebbe Rashab said this Maimer, but it came out. It was so unique and so special and so outstanding. This Maimer came out by itself, and we'll also learn later on the Maimer that it was the Rebbe Rashab said it twice. But upon him, the idea was that it was a very special Maimer, very special thing that speaks about this pasuk. Shaykh was manazeh, that this is appropriate for this time specifically. The Rebbe doesn't explain over here, but essentially the Maimer of Echolzu speaks a lot about Avos Yisrael. And the Rebbe always emphasizes that we know that the way to rectify the Churban of Beis HaMikdash is by undermining and to countering the cause of the destruction, which is unnecessary hate. So the way how we counter that is through love. That's also in a way of unnecessary love, Avos Yisrael. So therefore, since the Maimer of Echolzu speaks a lot about countering Sinas Chinam and the idea of Avos Yisrael, so therefore it's very appropriate and auspicious for this time of year. And this is in addition to the obvious connection, in addition to the fact that this is a pasuk that's in this week's parsha. And actually, when the Rebbe Rashab said it, this Maimer, he actually did not say it on this parsha, as we'll soon see. He said it Simchas Torah, he said it Parshas Noach. Anyway, and over there, in all these Amarim, starting from the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe, he examines the fact that we need to understand the word that should have been used in Lashon Kodesh is Yecholzu. What's the difference in Yecholzu and Hecholzu, which is the word used in the Parsha? The Hecholzu mashma kulchem. That Hecholzu seems to be that all of you should become drafted. Meatchem, since it says from amongst you, dahainu miktsasam. So then it's only some of you. If you're using the word that has to do with some of you, we will say it should have said yecholzu. That would have been a more appropriate term. Like we see in the continuation of the pasuk, that it was not the whole Klal Yisrael. It wasn't all 600,000 males between the age of 20 and 60 that went out to war. Only 1,000 lamata and 1,000 lamata. So now the Rebbe brings down two explanations that the Medrash has in the words 1,000 lamata. There's the normal thing that we think of, which is every shevet had 1,000 men in this army. Altogether, there would be 12,000 men that went to war against Midian. But then there's a different explanation. Let's see it inside the brackets. According to the both explanations, in what does it mean? Elef lamata. Either elef lachol mata means that 1,000 for every shevet, for every tribe, or the Medrash says that the repetition of elef lamata, if you already say elef lamata, that already means 1,000 per tribe. Why is he saying it twice? So the Medrash learns out, there's a different opinion in the Medrash, a different explanation in the Medrash, that really there was 2,000 for every shevet, making it a total of 24,000. But be that as it may, if it was 12,000 or 24,000, it definitely wasn't the whole Klal Yisrael, wasn't all 600,000. Therefore, it should have said Yecholzu, which is more appropriate when you're talking about individuals than rather Hecholzu, that you're talking about the entire group. So that's one question. Another question, also when you understand why was the war of Midian specifically through Moshe? Only, like we said before, this was the culmination of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. He was the one that had to do it before he died. It couldn't have been done after he died. To the degree that Moshe Rabbeinu had self-sacrifice for it. Like we mentioned before, he didn't delay. Like it's brought down the Medrash, it's brought down the Mamorim. Moshe Rabbeinu knew that after the war of Midian, Moshe Rabbeinu will be gathered to his nation, meaning he will pass away. Still in all, Moshe Rabbeinu did not delay, did not tarry. He was quick and on the ball right away to go into this war, even though he knew that this was the time that would bring his death closer. So all these questions, it's explained concerning this in the Mamarim, the Teichen, in the Melchemes Midian, the content of the idea of the war of Midian, it's about sublimating and subjugating the Klippa of Midian. What's the Klippa of Midian? The Midian, the word Midian, who inyanihu modin, it's related to the word disagreement, meriva, and arguments and disputes. Melchemes Midian, the war of Midian, inyanahu atikun al inyan hamodin v'meriva, when there's ever idea of arguments and disputes. So the war against Midian is repairing that and countering that. The Hainu Shalom V'Achdus, in other words, bringing about peace and oneness and unity. Until the sublimation is in a way that not just you are forcing peace upon the combatants and the parties, but you are transforming darkness to light. There's two ways of making peace. There's one way that Chassidus always brings down, that Hashem makes peace in his exalted ones, that there's Malach Michal and Malach Gabriel, one is water, one is fire. They don't extinguish each other because when they're in the presence of the king, so they make peace, just like two ministers and officers that are in the presence of the king, they are in his battle. But that's not in the way of Ishapcha. They didn't really change. It's just that they are overwhelmed in the presence of the king, and therefore they are making peace between themselves. But the ultimate way of subjugating the clip of Midian is to transform the darkness to light. And the Rebbe brings an example of where we see by the war against Midian that there was the transformation of darkness to light, that the Klippa was incorporated and subsumed in Kedusha. Like it's explicit in the continuation of the Psukim. After it speaks about the war, concerning the captives and the booty and everything that they took that was given to the Jewish people, till even a portion of this was given not only to the ones that went out to war and to the Shvatim that represented in the war, but even the Leviim and the Kohanim. This means, where do we see the Ishapcha in this? The transformation. Instead of the fact that this was the wealth and the possessions and the properties of Midian, instead of that, it was transformed. That means that it was initially associated with the clip of Midian. It was under the domain of Midian and the clip of Midian. Instead, Nepach was transformed. Yisrael became the wealth and possessions of the Yidden, until it even became the possessions of Levim and the Kohanim. Like it's explained, the detailed aspects of how this all the things that were taken were divided. Moving in Yom Baruch is from the content, from reading about how it took place in the physically how they divided and all the different and the Yidden and the Levim and the Kohanim took part in what was captured. From this, it's understood that spiritually as well, it wasn't just a physical wealth that they incorporated. It means the spirituality of Midian was also incorporated and elevated the clip of Midian into Kedusha. The Rebbe goes on and says, in a similar way, the opposite, is from the content of what the idea is in the spiritual, that's how it came down, the details in the physical. In other words, why in the physical was there this whole emphasis and this whole idea about the physical dividing of the spoils of war, the Kohanim, the Levim taking spoils of war? That's because in the spiritual realm, the Klippa of Midian was taken over by Kedusha. So since in the spiritual realm it was taken over and absorbed into Kedusha and transformed into Kedusha, so that's why in the physical realm it resulted that physically the possessions of Midian went over to the realm of Kedusha to be under the control of Yid. The closest thing is that the bittul of Afichas Klippas Midian, this general idea of nullifying and transforming the clip of Midian, Nas idea Torah, that's accomplished through Torah. Torah is the one that's the counterbalance to what Midian is about. Why? What did we say Midian is? Midian is in the word modern and Mariva, the idea of argument and disagreement. And Torah is just the opposite of that. Shinyana hu inyan hashalom, the idea of Torah is the idea of peace, like the Chazal say, Lo nitna Torah ela lasas shalom ba'olam. The entire purpose of the Torah given was only to make peace in the world. And even to such a degree where we see disputes and arguments in Torah, that's arguments for the sake of peace. Va'ad, the Rebbe says in the second line of the last paragraph, even when it comes to the war of Torah, in other words, the battle and the arguments that we find throughout Torah, Chazal say, eventually, those that are arguing, when they are arguing for the sake of heaven, when they are learning Torah for the sake of heaven, so then their arguments cause them that instead of being angry with each other and becoming enemies to each other, actually the arguments lead, eventually they become friends and they love each other. Like the Chazal explained in the Nevuas Bilam, that Vahe Basufa means at the end, even after all the disputes and arguments, they have the level of Ava, they have the idea of love. But it needs to be learned Torah the way Torah is supposed to be learned to ensure that the arguments do not lead to division. So the Rebbe explains how is that so. 3 lines from the bottom. When Torah study is not in a way of I want to prove my position right. His entire purpose of giving his opinion is that he should be right. And he needs to have that his opinion should be accepted. And that's his whole purpose. Whatever I say goes. In other words, he's not out for truth's sake. He's out to make his opinion known, his name known. But if a person avoids that trap, but he's studying Torah for its sake, he wants to know Torah. He doesn't want to hear his opinion. He wants to hear what Torah has to say about the matter. Even when there's a situation, when there's a war in the Torah, when there's arguments and dispute, you might think it'll cause a division, but since the dispute is not to satisfy the person's own ego, but it's about drilling down for the truth. In other words, it's for the sake of Torah. In the Seifim, eventually, they become friends to each other. That's the idea of studying Torah for its own sake. More like explained in many places in the Mamarim of my father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, stop at the second page. When a person studies Torah, not to defeat someone else, not to prove their position right, that the main thing is that he has to be victorious, but rather he's studying Torah for its sake, meaning l'shem Torah, for the sake of Torah. He's looking to understand what Torah is saying and so on. So then the study is in a way of love. Like the simple sense of the matter is the even when there's disagreements in Torah, these prohibit and these make it say that's permitted. So then both these and those are the words of the living God. So therefore, it's not about modern mariva, it's not about ego, it's not about dispute. So therefore, the disparate opinions, the different opinions, are in a manner of peace. And similar to this, and even more so, how halacha the halacha in Torah is out of bittul specifically. That's why it says concerning David that Havaya is with him, meaning that the halacha was ruled according to the view of David HaMelech when he was in dispute with others. Why is that so? So he's saying as follows. David HaMelech exemplifies the idea of bittul. David is the idea of malchus, Malchus the idea of bittul. The loy kishol, not like Shaul. The Shaul holach acharatam. Shaul followed reason. As we know, when it came for him to slaughter all the animals of Amalek, he reasoned, what's the logic of slaughtering all the animals for nothing? Let me go ahead and offer them as karbonis. So his problem was he didn't have enough bittul. He had seichel. Shaul was merchayves hanor. He had the broadness of the river, and the broadness indicates bina, but the seichel was not in the way of bittul. Mashenkin David was in the way of humility and bittul. Therefore, the halacha follows him. So therefore, here's another thing where we find Torah's association with peace. Also, the halacha of Torah, how does one determine the halacha, is when it's in the way of peace. Peace is associated with the idea of bittul, that I don't stand on my opinion. It's not about me and what I think. I'm completely nullified to the purpose and to the meaning and to the goal and to bring out the correct halacha over here. there's an interesting example for this, that when two people are arguing and another person comes and challenges or brings a proof. So there are two ways how the first person that's proven wrong can react to the person that brought a proof against him. One way is he can scheme and plot and say, let me see if I could find a way to disprove his proof. And I'm just accepting it for now because I have no other choice. I'm just like trapped by his iron proof. Another approach is that the person that's been proven wrong goes to that person that proved him wrong, and he thanks him. They said, thank you so much that you illuminated my mind. You clarified for me this thing. You've set me on the correct path. You've taken me away from my wrong views. So that type of attitude is one where it's not about the person's ego, obviously, but it's about finding the truth. And such a type of search for truth and desire for truth, that is a result of the idea of bit. So that's what he concludes, 4 lines from the bottom of the first paragraph on the second page. This will be understood very well, the connection between the war of Midian specifically with Moshe. The idea of Moshe is the idea of Torah. Remember Torah of Moshe, my servant. Why is it called the Torah of Moshe, my servant? So we see that Moshe is totally identified with the Torah. That the Torah is called by Moshe's name. It's Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah. And since Moshe Rabbeinu is the embodiment and strongly connected with Torah, is therefore the idea in Torah, through the idea of Torah, Nasa Bittul Klippas Midian becomes the nullification of the Klippa of Midian. So now we understand why Moshe Rabbeinu had to be the one to defeat Midian, because since Torah represents peace, Midian represents enmity, arguments, etc., disputes, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the whole idea of Torah, so Moshe Rabbeinu had to fight the disputes of Midian through the peace of Torah. Any questions before we go on? Now, in the second paragraph on the second page of the Maimer, to be able to understand this matter even more in depth, this will be understood according to what's brought down the continuation of the Mamorim. What the Chazal said, whoever is involved in Torah, for Torah's sake, in other words, in such a way that he's not here fighting a war for his own ego. He makes peace in the heavenly court and the court down here below. The simple meaning of this is the court of above is referring to the spiritual worlds, and the lower court indicates this world down here below. That through studying of Torah for Torah's sake, he makes peace in both. It's explained in the Mamorim is called Seder Ishtalshlus. In a similar vein, it's in all the specific levels of Seder Ishtalshlus. In every level of Seder Ishtalshlus, there is the upper court and the lower court. And both of them he makes peace through studying Torah Lishma. The upper court can sometimes be referred to intellect versus emotions, like we're soon going to say, or sometimes it goes on Midos versus Malchus, Zav versus Nukva. But be that as it may, in every level there's a unity and peace that's created through the Torah study down here below. So he says with Protis Yos, and even more specifically, this is to be found in every single person in his service. He makes peace both in his upper court and his lower court. Explained over there in the Rambarim to the higher and lower court are the intellect and the emotions. Shaloi is the intellect and emotions. V'asholim choice of benem, and the peace that he makes between them, who shamidus yisnagu al pi hamoichin, that the emotions should follow the directives of the intellect. Hagboros hamoich al lev, that the intellect overpowers and overcomes the emotions. The heart. It's possible that the brain and the heart should be separate. There needs to be the brain over the heart. We can say an example for this. More from the well-known story that my father-in-law related al Dvara Piskim, that talak is on a talk, about the saying that the talak, the year Taf Kuf Lamed, was without a tolk in 1730. It wasn't a seder. It wasn't like the way things are supposed to be. There was the way different chassidim of the Mezritcher Magi, different Talmidim, as part of their state of bringing themselves to bittul and total removal of ego. So they would do wild things. They would dance in the streets. They would do somersaults in the streets. And this is all to remove themselves from their ego. But still in all, this wasn't an appropriate way. This is not the normal way things are supposed to be in Avodas Hashem. We need to be in control of ourselves. The intellect needs to rule over the heart. Even though my heart wants to expand in such a type of way and defeat my ego and so on, the brain has to control it. And perhaps also the Rebbe means over here that literally they were dancing in the street out of their great love and awe of Hashem, that they were so excited about it, and the brain was controlling it. It had to be controlling it, the Alter Rebbe said. The Rebbe continues, said we can add to this, so too in general in Klal Yisrael, there is the higher court and lower court. There's Yisachar, which are Talmidei Chachamim, and those are sitting in the tents learning. They are the higher court. Top of the last page, Hainu Zvulun, Balei Asakim, business people that are the work of Zvulun. There has to be the making peace between them, until there's a partnership made between them. Like it's explained in Shulchan Aruch, one can make a condition initially. That Yisachar is like learning for Zvulun's sake. In other words, the Torah learning guy is learning for the sake of the person that's in business. Tmuras tmichasa b'Yisachar as a reward, like for Zvulun, for the business person supporting Yisachar financially. Yisachar, the Talmid Chacham, is learning on his behalf. Okay, do a milas tamchen derais, as it's known, the special advantage of the supporters of Torah, the Chsiv Behu, that concerning the supporters of Torah, it says v'semcha ma'ushar, that those that support the Torah, we say eitz chaim hil makzikim bo v'semcha ma'ushar. Torah is a tree of life to those that hold on to it, and those that support the Torah are fortunate. With this is even more understood why the war of Midian is dependent specifically on Moshe Rabbeinu, so that they should be able to be the joining of the intellect and the emotions, and so to the joining in the general Yidden between those that are involved in Torah study and those that are involved in making a living in business. It's insufficient just study of Torah, and not even to ask from the Kohen that will be in those days. Hashofet should be a mechad. The Chazal say that the Kohen is like the judge in your days. He's a judge, so therefore this Kohen also has the crown of Torah, not just the crown of Kahuna that Pirkei Avos speaks about, the three crowns, because he also rules in halacha of Torah. Still in all, it's not just enough to seek counsel by the Kohen, but tzrichim lishos einei ha'eda. We need to inquire by the eyes of the congregation. Roshi Alf Yisrael, the heads of the thousands of Yidden, the K'mavur Betanya Perek Beis, explained in Tanya, the second chapter, Roshi Yisrael shebachol doira mechinas hamoichin, the heads of the Yidden in every generation, those are the level of intellect. So that's another joining of intellect and emotions that we are guided by the Rosh B'nai Yisrael, by the Einei Eid. So the Rebbe concludes with a bracha. From all this understood the content of the lesson from this Maimer. It has to be the war against Midian. But there has to be peace and love. Especially according to what's related in the story of my father-in-law about this Maimer. The Maimer of Echolzu, the Rebbe Rashab said in Tafresh Nuntes, was said once on Simchas Torah, afterwards, another time when there was a gathering of his family, of the Rebbe Rashab's family, it was said again the same Maimer. Also, these details are a lesson, a directive indicating that it's applicable for everyone in all times. This is all a lesson for every single one, man and woman. Also, women are obligated in it, because peace and love is a mitzvah that's not time dependent. So even women are obligated in it. Should be the will of Hashem. Should be peace in the heavenly court and the court below and the court above. Which is the koil gam shalom ben Hashem. This includes also the peace between the neshama and the weights above. The neshama shenasata b'toyri. The neshama, what you gave me is pure. In other words, the neshama, the way it's in the highest levels. The neshama k'mashiyar delamata. And the neshama, the way it descended below. Barasi etzart and afachtabi. You created her. You formed her. You blew her into me. So there has to be this peace together, until the ultimate peace. This will be in the future. Then we will perform before you like the mitzvahs of your will. Soon, mamish, with joy and gladness of heart.